Yes, the topic today is the quadrants. How you spend your time. That's going to be important. Learning how you spend your time and self management. Okay, the uh, how many of you spend your time unwisely? Are there things that you need to do that you should be doing that you're not doing? And what can you do to better spend your time doing things that you need to do? That's what the chapter in your book is trying to get you to focus on. Focus on the type of activities that you need to do. And they put forth four quadrants. Four quadrants. And this is on page 126, page 124, really. In which quadrant am I choosing to spend most of my time? That's what you're supposed to ask yourself. There are four quadrants. Quadrant one, quadrant two over here. That's not urgent. Notice that, not urgent. Quadrant one, urgent. Over here is important. Important and urgent is quadrant one. Those are things that you need to spend your time on, important things that are urgent. Quadrant two is important, but it's not urgent. Quadrant three is not important, but it's urgent. And your last quadrant four, not important and not urgent. Which of these four quadrants do you think students are spending the majority of their time? What does the research indicate? What do you think? Where do they spend the majority of their time? Students. Unmute yourselves. Give me an idea.
I say quadrant four.
Quadrant four. Yes, that's exactly. So if we can take some of the time away from quadrant four and move it to quadrant one, which is your priority, you will be better off with your education. Let's see what some of the things. Quadrant one, you're staying up all night. Staying up all night to cram for an exam. That's pretty important, isn't it? To study for a test. Wouldn't you say that's important?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's important. And it's urgent. But you could have made it easier on yourself if you just studied for the test, studied for the exam. You could have made it easier on it and did it over a larger period of time. Okay? So now, uh, quadrant two says you keep trying to create a study group. That's important, right? That's important, right? To have a study group, right? But it's not urgent. It's not urgent. Quadrant three, you say, well, I got to go to this meeting But it's not important, but it's urgent that you go to your floor hall meetings. It's urgent that you go to your various meetings of your clubs, your organization. That's urgent, but it's not important. Here you are in quadrant 4, you're watching TV and you're going to bed late. You're playing cards. You have to go to the movies. It's not important and it's not urgent, and it's taking up a lot of your time away from your schooling. How many hours are you supposed to focus on studying? You're taking a 3-credit course. How many hours are you supposed to focus on studying? 3-credit course. Are you're taking PSYC 113. What does the first number mean? You're going to be focusing on scholarship. What does the first number mean? Does anyone remember from your course catalog? Freshmen are classified as ones. Suppose this number was 213. What do you think the 2 means?
Sophomore.
Very well. And 313?
Junior.
And 413?
Senior.
Senior level course. But you can take some of these, depending upon your proficiency, your advanced studies. So you got to focus on. Now, what does the 3 mean? 333, the last number from your course catalog. That's the number of credits. So if you're taking 12 credits this summer, 3, 6, 9, 12. That's 4 classes. 3 in this course, 3 in your next course, 3 in your third, 3 in your fourth. So that's what you're doing. Now, what do you think the middle number means? Which semester is it offered? When is this?
Semester.
Very well. And suppose it was a 123. When do you think that one would be offered? That's right, in the spring. And then it goes back and forth. 1, 2, fall, spring. 3, 4, 5, 6, fall, spring. So that's how you read those. And you have to, and how many hours are you studying for this 3-credit course? You got 4 classes you're taking. How many hours are you supposed to study for those courses? Give me an idea. Unmute yourselves.
4 hours.
Okay, 4. Okay. Yeah, 3 is good. 3 is good.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3.
Yeah. That's right. So now, how many hours is that per week that you normally study? How many hours per week do you normally study? You go to class 3 days a week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, which will come out to 3 hours. Normally, those 3 credits, like you go for 50 minutes one day, you go 50 Wednesday, 50 Monday, 50 minutes to Wednesday, and 50 minutes Friday. So it's like 3 hours there. 3 hours. So 3. How many hours? So, how many seat hours does that come out to at the end of a semester? You found out that a semester is how many weeks? How many weeks is a semester? When you hear the word semester, what are you thinking of? How many weeks?
15.
Very well. You remember very well. And so you're taking 3 hours a week, and that's 15 weeks. How many seat hours are you seated in your seat with that class? 3 hours a week. 3 times 10 is 30, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you got 45 seat hours. 45 hours in each one of those classes. And you got to equal that with your studying time so that you can get ahead, and you will stay in your quadrant, which is your goal, Quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, there are some things that are important, but they're not urgent in Quadrant 2. And then there are unimportant things in Quadrant 3 and 4. Unimportant, urgent, unimportant, not urgent. You have to make wise choices about how I spend my time when I'm in college. How do I make wise choices? And that's what the goal is. Quadrant 1, important and urgent, are important activities done under the pressure of nearing deadlines. You know that you haven't been working on a deadline, but you want to get it done. And you are under pressure. These are critical actions that must be done now, and the consequences may be grim. So here's an example of one of his friends in college began his junior paper, which was the equivalent of 2 courses, just 3 days before it was due. You will never do that, right? 3 days before something is due, start working on it.
Right.
Okay. Yes. He claimed that success in college was important to him, and that impending deadlines certainly made this assignment urgent. He worked on the paper for 72 hours straight, finally turning it in without proofreading it. Do you proofread your material?
Yes.
Very well, very well. Although he barely passed the assignment this time, he fell deeper and deeper into the pattern of procrastination. In our senior year, he failed too many courses and was dismissed by the university, the college. When you act on low priorities and neglect high priorities, you sabotage your goals and you sabotage your dreams. Your goals and your dreams. At the last minute, procrastinators dive desperately into Quadrant 1 to handle an action that has always been important, but is now desperately urgent. You see that? People who spend their lives in Quadrant 1 are constantly dashing around and putting out brush fires in their lives. See, there's a brush fire in your life, and you're always putting it out. They frantically create modest achievements in the present while sacrificing extraordinary success in the future. Worse, Quadrant 1 is where people often experience stress, and stress can eat you alive if you are not careful. Stress, and sometimes they develop what is called ulcers, and they risk nervous breakdowns. You don't want any of those. So it's important for you to manage your time wisely. How do I spend my time? Quadrant 2, that was Quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is important and not urgent. They are activities done without the pressure of looming deadlines. Remember, quadrant one was the deadlines. You waited till the last minute to get it done. Number two, they are important but not urgent, but you're spending a lot of time in that area. These actions move you a step closer to your personally valuable outcome or experience. When you engage in an important activity with time enough to do it well, you can create your greatest dreams. Lacking urgency, quadrant 2 actions are easily postponed. You're putting them off now. Almost all of the suggestions in this book belong to quadrant 2. For example, you could postpone forever keeping a journal using the wise choice process, that is, adopting the language of creators, discovering and visualizing your dreams. You're designing your life and you're creating personal affirmations. I will be this when I grow up. I will do this. I will not do it. So it's always what you're going to be doing. You got to use your wise choice process. However, when you do take purposeful actions such as these, you create a rich and full life. Quadrant 2 is where you will find creative people. You are the creator. You're the one saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to create a study group, and I'm going to call a few people, and you're not going to waste a lot of time. And they dropped out of the group and like this. You're going to do it and move on. Quadrant 3, not important, but urgent. Quadrant 3 is under quadrant 1. You want to go to these meetings, okay, and you want to do these things. You want to be a part of the in crowd. How often do you respond to the demand of your ringing phone, only to be trapped in a long, unwanted conversation? Have many of you tried to get off the phone with individuals? And you,
Yes.
yeah, and it took up a lot of your time? Yeah.
Yes.
How do you normally get off the phone with them? How do you normally reclaim your time? How do you get back to your goals?
Well, I gotta go.
Oh, you'll tell them bluntly like that?
Yeah, they got something straight up.
Okay. Okay, I got to go. And they'll understand and call you back later, or you'll call them back later.
Yeah.
Okay. You agree to do something because you can't bring yourself to say no. How many of you have done that?
Yes.
Okay. So they're taking you to, when we allow someone else's urgency to talk us into an activity unimportant to our own goals and dreams, we have chosen to be in quadrant 3. Isn't that amazing? You chose to be in quadrant 3 because you allowed someone else's urgency to talk you into an unimportant activity towards your dreams and goals. And quadrant 4, it's not important and it's not urgent. It's under quadrant 2. Okay? These are simply time wasters. They waste your time. Everyone wastes some time, so it's not something to judge yourself for, though your inner critic may try. You got a little critic. I have a little critic that sits on my left shoulder and say, Hargrove, do not do that. You know that project is due. Okay? Instead, listen to your inner guide. That's that little shoulder on my shoulder. I have an angel that comes on that shoulder also. Become more conscious of your choices and maximize wasting your hours of valuable time in a day. 2014 Baylor University study showed that college students spend more than half of their time walking, working on their smartphones. They spend a lot of their time. So you don't want to do that. A college professor I know surveyed his classes and found that many of his students watch more than 40 hours of television a week. 40 hours of television a week? How many of you know people or do that? Do you know people that do that? Watch television 40 hours. That's a week's work. 8 times 5, 40 hours. You work 8 hours a day, but they're watching. That means they're staying up late in the night watching television. How are those many hours contributing to your goals? You should ask yourself. How spending all this time contributing to my dreams? I have dreams in life. And then they go on to tell you about how many hours you should study. A study in 1961 showed that students in higher education studied an average of 25 hours per week. 25 hours per week. What do you think it is today? Give me an idea. Okay, 20 years later, in 1981, college students' study time had dropped 20 hours per week, from 25 to 20. By 2014, the average dropped again 17 hours per week, according to the National Survey of Student Engagement, NSSE. That's an important study. In a 15-week semester, that's a total of 120 hours of studying. These numbers help explain why so many capable students are off course in college. It's difficult to learn complex subjects in so little time in Quadrant I and Quadrant II. Students are spending so little time in Quadrant I. They're not Quadrant I. They are not preparing for those exams well. They're cramming. And Quadrant II, they're creating study groups. So that's what you want. You want study groups. What are some other things that could help you to improve your college experience academically? You can get a tutor. A study group is one in Quadrant 2, but you can also get a tutor. And it's free at Philander Smith College, so you can focus on those type of of course, you can meet with your professor and talk about your assignments. So that's important for you to begin to focus on Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2. There's an activity that I want you to do. You will focus on your purpose. As you spend more time in Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2, you will notice a dramatic improvement in the results that you are trying to create. So that yeah. Welcome to the session. We're on page self-management, how you can manage your behavior better. And can you mute yourself? Very well, thank you. So we're on page 126 of your textbook, and we're talking about the various quadrants and the assignment. Write an action These are some steps for appropriate quadrants on your chart. After each action, put the appropriate amount of time you spend in the activity. For example, quadrant 4 might be filled with such actions as these. Number 1, watch Netflix. Can you believe the students are actually watching Netflix for 2 hours a day? Phone calls just with one person is 1 hour. Checked and posted on, they posted on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter. Spent 3 hours a day. They went to the mall and wandered around for 2 hours in a mall. In a mall for 2 hours. How can you do that? Yeah. Have you ever heard of someone going to a mall for 2 hours? Yeah. Hung out in the cafeteria for 2 hours. Wow. Played video games 4 hours. So that's that's pretty different. That's pretty different. And which of the quadrants do you spend the most time? That's what you're going to try to do. What specific evidence do you use to draw this conclusion? If you continue using your time in this way, you're likely to reach your goals and dreams. That's what you want to put in your quadrant 1. How often, what keeps you from taking purposeful action? And so that's what you want to focus on. How do I make different choices? How do I use my time more wisely? So that's important for you, to use your time wisely. When I started college, this is a story, one student's story, at Oakland University, which is in Michigan. Jason Pogassi. He says, when I started college as a freshman student, I knew I would have a little trouble with the transition from high school to college. What I didn't know was that my main challenge would come from distractions. I didn't know I would be easily distracted by all of the goings on college campuses. There are a lot of things happening on college campuses. There's a mall only 5 minutes from campus. And when my friends wanted to hang out there, I wouldn't say no. Other times we'd play video games and go out to dinner or watch television. There was always something to distract me and no one to tell me to get back to work. His parents weren't there to tell him to get back to work. He hadn't learned how to self-manage his time. And that's what the lecture is on today. Importance of choices and self-management of your time. I was an AB student in high school, and I was used to things coming easy to me. In college, there's a lot more work, and it's definitely not work you can do in 5 minutes and be done like in high school. Well, in high school, they give you a lot of work also. I always found some excuse not to do my work. And then I tried to do it on the day it was due. I remember waiting until 30 minutes before my first chemistry test to start studying. 30 minutes before the test, he started studying. That's interesting. When my grades started dropping, I realized I needed to change. And so I wasn't sure how to change. That's when we read about self-management in the On-Course book. In class, we did an activity where we divided a paper into 4 quadrants. Then we put what we had done in the last two quadrants into those quadrants. I only had a few things in Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2 which was important. But Quadrant 4, which was unimportant, it was full. I realized I was studying about 3 hours a week, but I was going to the mall about 5 hours, watching movies and television about 6 to 10 hours, playing video games about 20 hours, and surfing the internet for about 30 hours. I had never had a high-speed connection before, and things like YouTube and Facebook were consuming a good part of my life. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now that I had figured out my problem, I needed a solution. I started by hanging up the quadrants on my room with my wasted time on them. I then put up another blank quadrant chart next to it. I decided to try new ways to manage my time over the next week and kept track of how I spent my time each day. I set a goal to reduce my time in Quadrant 3 and 4 to more than 20 hours per week and increase my time in Quadrant 1 and 2 to 30 to 40 hours. At first, I tried to completely cut out everything that was a waste of time, but I found myself stressed out. I was studying so much, I thought my brain would explode, and I couldn't remember what I was studying. And then I tried getting all my work done before I did anything that could be seen as a waste of time. I began to focus. I filled in the quadrants at the end of the first week, and then I filled in halfway. I was accomplishing my goals halfway. My new system makes me more aware of what I'm choosing to spend my time and how I'm choosing to spend my time. Less time on the internet, and I learned to say no. I remembered what a bunch of friends wanted when they wanted to go to the movies the night before I had a math test. They asked me to go 10 times, and I stayed home and I studied. I actually did really well on the test. And that's how I started changing my life. I missed almost no assignments, and my grade had improved in every class. I found a strategy that arranges my time so that I can get my important work done and still have time for fun. And I plan to keep using this system